Tonight and tomorrow is Gimel Tammuz, which is the 26th Yortzeit of the Rebbe. And so there's a custom over the course of the period to study what is called the Maimer Ata Tetzaveh. That's effectively the last Maimer that the Rebbe distributed for people to learn. And it conveys some very important principles about Judaism in general and about our particular spiritual development. So he starts off by quoting that there's a verse in the Torah that says, Hashem tells Moshe, you should command the Jewish people that they should bring oil from a crushed olive that should be the source of light in the Mishkan. And the Maimer analyzes all of the words in that verse because many of them don't seem to make sense. Most notably, that usually it just says, Tzav, instruct the Jewish people. Whereas over here it says, Ve'ata tetzaveh, and you will instruct the Jewish people. And then, of course, what's the notion of the crushing of an olive? And why does it say that it should be lam ma'or, to be the source of light, the illuminator, rather than just saying for light? So the Maimer goes through all of these things in a tremendous amount of detail, but we'll focus on some of the salient points. One of which is the word tetzaveh, in addition to the obvious, which means that you should instruct. The word tetzaveh also means that you should connect. And in that phrase, the Torah gives us an insight into what the role of Moshe is. The Zohar tells us that there's a Moshe in every generation. And so by understanding what the role of Moshe is, we understand what the role is of that singular tzaddik in each period of history. And what is the role? Ve'ata, you, tetzaveh es b'nei Yisrael. Your job is to create a meaningful connection between the Jewish people and Hashem. So it's incredibly significant because if you're talking about the Yortzeit of the Rebbe, what is a Rebbe? What's the role of a Rebbe? It's not just another Torah scholar or an individual who is very pious. It's somebody whose role it is ata tetzaveh, to create a meaningful connection between the Jewish people and Hashem. And that's regardless of who those people are. It's regardless of whether they are learned, observant, disengaged. It actually doesn't make a difference. The job is that the Moshe Rabbeinu has to connect them to Hashem in the most profound way. So for that reason, we find that Moshe is called Raya Mehemna. Raya Mehemna is Aramaic and it means the faithful shepherd. And it goes back to one of the early stories of Moshe's career where he was actually a shepherd. And there was a lamb that ran away from the rest of the flock and he chased it. And his intention obviously was to reconnect it, to reconnect the stray sheep with the rest of the flock. And obviously that way it would be cared for. And as a direct result of that, he landed up running and finding himself next to the burning bush. So the first moment of interaction between Hashem and Moshe, which eventually led to his appointment as the leader, which eventually led to the Exodus, which eventually led to the giving of the Torah, all began by exactly that point, Raya Mehemna, that he is a faithful shepherd. You can rely on him. And throughout Moshe's career, he endorses that title. Because every time the Jewish people get themselves into trouble and rebel or complain or do whatever they do, the faithful shepherd goes and brings them back and argues for them, that Hashem should not, God forbid, punish them. So on the face of it, that's what it means. Raya Mehemna means a faithful shepherd. You can rely on him, that he will always look after us. In the Maimer, the Rebbe says the same phrase could have a whole different meaning. Raya Mehemna is the shepherd of faith. In other words, the role of a shepherd is to make sure that the sheep have everything that they need, which is, more than anything else, to provide their sustenance. So it's the job of the shepherd to make sure that the sheep are taken to pasture that is going to be suitable pasture for them, so that they can be nourished and have what they need in order not only to survive, but to thrive. Now, emunah, faith, is something that every single one of us has, like it or not, by choice or not by choice. We all have faith. We don't necessarily all feel that faith all of the time, but we all have faith. And there's certain occasions during our lives where the faith just suddenly springs into the forefront of our minds, and then we behave differently to the normal, and maybe even in a way that we don't expect. So for example, you'll get a person who perhaps is not religious, and yet under different circumstances, either because something happens in their life that's maybe a a tragedy or a crisis, suddenly the faith comes to the fore. As the old cliche says, there's no atheist in a foxhole. So we all have faith. We're ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim according to the Gemara. We are believers, the descendants and children of believers. But for us, it's a little bit abstract and kind of removed from our reality until something happens to inspire it. So the job of the Moshe personality is Raya Mehemna, to shepherd our faith. Just like that shepherd has to make sure that the sheep have the nutrition that they need in order to survive, Moshe, or by extension the Moshes of every generation, it's their job to ensure that we have the spiritual sustenance that we need, so that even under ordinary circumstances, we have that degree of faith. So just to understand that a little bit better, there's an analysis in the Maimer of how is it that we actually have this faith? Where does it come from? Because it often behaves in an unexpected way. Often you'll have people who just don't seem to indicate that they have any connection, and the next thing you see that they have incredible faith in Hashem. It reminds me a little bit of a story. Some years ago, there was a group of Israelis who visited us, and we had a huge debate in the evening about whether or not God is real and whether or not there's such a thing as a soul. And we left kind of unresolved. They were very adamant about their view, and obviously I was adamant about my view. And the following morning, I happened to drive the kids to school and passed a minor car accident on the side of the road, and these Israelis were in that car accident, and they were, thank God, not harmed. But I jumped out of the car just to see that they were okay. And the very first thing that they said to me was, please, when you go to shul, say a prayer for us. So, it's inexplicable. You had such strong views just the night before, and now suddenly the faith came to the fore. So how does it work? So in the analysis of faith, there are two explanations that are given within Hasidus as to where faith comes from. The one is a principle called Mazlayu Chazi, and the other is a principle called Etzem HaNeshama. So Mazlayu Chazi means this. There's a very interesting story in the Tanakh about the prophet Daniel, that he was once with some of his colleagues and he had a divine revelation. There was an angel who appeared to him and he received a communication from the angel. And the Tanakh says very clearly that his colleagues who were with him did not see any of it, but they were all shaken by their experience. So the Gemara asks, that doesn't seem to make any sense. If they didn't see any of it, why were they shaken by the experience? And the Gemara answers, even though they personally did not see the angelic apparition, mazlaihu chazi, their mazel did see it. Now, usually when you use the word mazel, people think as in mazel tov. Or perhaps if people have a little bit more insight, so you know that the word mazel is often associated with the zodiac and astrological signs. But what the Gemara means when it says mazel is mazel from the word nozel, which means to flow. In other words, what it's telling us is there's a part of our soul that is not embodied in our physical state. There's a part of our soul that is still plugged into a higher spiritual reality. And that part of our soul sees things that we can't see, that our eyes can't see, that our brain can't really interpret. But it actually sees it. And you know how it is. Anything that you see becomes quite compelling. So if I, for example, had to tell you that, listen, you won't believe what happened yesterday, but this Brontosaurus Rex appeared in my garden, you'd think that I'd lost my marbles. But if you had to see a Brontosaurus Rex arrive in your garden, as weird as that sounds, if you've seen it, it's quite difficult to imagine that it's not true. So that's how it is. When you see things, they become much more real. Because there's a part of our soul that actually sees these things, sees that Hashem is real, doesn't just read it in books like we do, or talk about it in philosophical discussions, actually sees it as real. So that flows down and filters down into us, and so that we've got the super conscious awareness of the fact that there is actually a God. So that's the first principle of where faith comes from. Mazlayu chazi, that there's a dimension of our soul that we're not in touch with, but it is in touch with Hashem. And so on the odd occasion, it's able to wake us up to that message. In that case, Moshe's job as the faithful shepherd would be to help us to bring that down into our reality on a more consistent basis. You know, it's not to just have these flighty, unexpected episodes of faith, but to actually ingest it into real life, into the way we live and the way we see the world. That's what Moshe would train us to do. The second possibility of where faith comes from is called Etzem HaNeshama. Etzem HaNeshama means that the soul, as we've explained, is multi-layered. So far we've spoken about the soul as it lives inside of us, that's the conscious soul, and we've spoken about the soul as it lives beyond us, which is the superconscious soul. There's now a deeper dimension even than that, which is called Etzem HaNeshama, the essence of the soul. Now it's a fascinating principle because while you might judge something by its different components, the truth is that the real meat, the real chap of something is its essence. For example, if you have a look at a person, you say, wow, that person has blue eyes. That person is 6 foot tall. That person has broad shoulders. Okay, great. But now I don't know who they are. I only know description of some of their anatomical parts. But I don't know who they are. That's definitely not your essence, different components. And then if you had to say, well, this is the person who runs that business or has achieved that particular achievement, has finished the Comrades 3 times or summited Kilimanjaro, or this is the person who has a family of 5, whatever it is, those might give me more clues as to who the person is, but still not that person's essence. Your essence is the indescribable part of you that makes you who you are, uniquely you. And it doesn't need to be described. You look at a person and you actually see their essence. So the broad shoulders, well, the essence of those broad shoulders as opposed to somebody else's broad shoulders is that they're your broad shoulders. And the fact that you summited Kilimanjaro, well, thousands of people have done that, but your particular summit of Kilimanjaro is linked to your essence. So the essence of who you are actually informs everything about you, which is a fascinating concept. That means to say that if you get in touch with the essence, you actually get in touch with everything all at once. So the essence of our soul is the part of us that is one with Hashem. That's actually the essence of who we are. So that's why for us, faith is not something you have to learn. Faith is not something that relies on an experience. It's actually the DNA of who we are, if we were in touch with the essence of our soul. So according to that explanation, the role of Moshe as the Raya Mehemna, as the faithful shepherd, is that his goal is to expose to us our own essence. Now that's incredibly insightful because many times when people speak about things like Jewish outreach and influence, there's always the sense of me, the influencer, and you, the target. And we're kind of separate from each other. I have the resources that you lack, so I'm going to come into your life and teach you and inspire you and lift you and maybe, if I want to be dramatic, save you. That's not a Jewish view, actually. The Jewish view is your essence is where it needs to be. Your essence is one with Hashem. It doesn't get better than that. It doesn't get deeper than that. The only thing is that on average, we're not in touch with our essence. That's the problem. So you need a Moshe to assist you to peel away the outer layers to discover who you really are. And that's the job of Moshe as the so-called faithful shepherd or shepherd of faith. And just to give you one illustration of that, let's say, for example, that you had to walk down the street and see a fellow Jew and stop that fellow Jew in the middle of what they're doing and say, would you please put on tefillin? And you may never see that person ever again in your life. So if the goal was to educate them or to make them frum, that wouldn't be a very effective method because you're never going to see them again in your life. So you don't know where this is going to go. It was a shot in the dark. But if you appreciate that their essence, like your essence, is already one with Hashem and is exactly where it needs to be, and all we need is a catalyst to expose it, well, then that mitzvah was a catalyst. That mitzvah, even if the person never puts on tefillin again, that mitzvah was a moment of, aha, this is actually who I am. That's what we call Raya Mehemna, the shepherd of faith, the one who creates opportunities for us to feel in touch with the essence of our neshama.